Stop the tape. Dr. Phil's voice cut through the studio like a blade. The cameras kept rolling for 3 more seconds before the director's frantic hand signals finally killed the feed. In 27 years of television, he had never stopped mid-taping. But what was unfolding on that stage transcended every protocol, every segment plan, every carefully scripted transition. Sarah Mitchell, 27 years old, was about to say the words her mother hadn't heard in over 2 decades. And Dr. Phil knew this moment couldn't be contained by commercial breaks or producer notes. What happened in the next 8 minutes would become the most watched moment in daytime television history. 3 weeks earlier, Sarah's application had arrived at the Dr. Phil show offices in a standard manila envelope. The intake coordinator almost passed it over. They received thousands of family reconciliation requests every month. But something about Sarah's opening line stopped her cold. My mother has been writing me letters for 27 years. I've never opened a single one. The backstory was devastatingly simple. When Sarah was 6 months old, her mother Michelle had left. Not gradually, not with explanations, she had simply walked out one Tuesday morning and never came back. Sarah's father had raised her alone, never speaking Michelle's name, never explaining why mommy wasn't there anymore. The trauma had calcified into a wall of silence that had lasted Sarah's entire life. But 3 months ago, Sarah's father had died. And in his belongings she found them, 324 unopened letters from Michelle, spanning 27 years. The discovery had shattered Sarah's entire understanding of her childhood. Her father had been intercepting every letter, every card, every attempt at contact. Michelle hadn't abandoned her daughter and stayed silent. She had been fighting for connection every single month for nearly 3 decades. That's when Sarah reached out to Dr. Phil. The taping had started normally enough. Dr. Phil introduced Sarah to the audience, establishing her story with his characteristic directness. Sarah sat in the guest chair, composed but visibly tense, a cardboard box at her feet containing all 324 letters. So you've never read any of these? Dr. Phil asked, gesturing to the box. Not one, Sarah replied, her voice steady but hollow. For 27 years, I believed my mother didn't want me. And it turns out, she never stopped trying. The audience didn't know that Michelle was backstage at that very moment, watching on a monitor, unaware she would be brought out. Dr. Phil walked Sarah through the timeline. The 6th-month abandonment. Growing up believing she was unwanted. The discovery after her father's death. The realization that everything she believed was a lie constructed by grief and bitterness. I spent my entire life hating someone who was actually fighting for me, Sarah said, her composure finally cracking. And I don't know how to process that. Dr. Phil leaned forward. Sarah, your mother has been trying to reach you for 27 years. She's written you 324 letters. She's never given up. The question is, are you ready to hear her side? Sarah's eyes widened. She's here? She's been backstage since you arrived. She doesn't know I'm about to bring her out. The audience gasped. This wasn't in the segment plan. The producers in the control booth were frantically checking their notes. This reveal was supposed to happen after the commercial break, with time to prepare both women, to brief them on what would happen. But Dr. Phil had made a decision in that moment. He had seen something in Sarah's face, a readiness that might evaporate if given time to overthink. This needed to happen now. Bring Michelle out, he said to the stage manager, his voice firm. The studio went completely silent. Every person in that audience understood they were about to witness something unrehearsed, unscripted, and potentially devastating. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. The stage door opened. Michelle Mitchell stepped onto the stage, and the moment she saw her daughter, her legs nearly gave out. A production assistant had to steady her. She was 54 years old but looked older, worn down by nearly 3 decades of rejection and longing. Sarah stood up from her chair, her entire body rigid. For 30 seconds neither woman moved. They simply stared at each other across the stage, separated by 8 feet and 27 years of silence. Dr. Phil stepped between them, his hands raised slightly. "Before either of you speaks, I need you both to hear something." He turned to the control booth. "Play the package we prepared." On the studio monitors, a video began to play. It showed Michelle's home. A modest apartment with every surface covered in photos of Sarah. Photos from her childhood that Michelle had somehow obtained. School pictures. Newspaper clippings of Sarah's college graduation. A photo from Sarah's wedding last year that Michelle had printed from Facebook. The camera showed Michelle's desk, where she still wrote a letter to Sarah every month, even though they had all been returned unopened for years. "I never stopped being your mother." Michelle's voice played over the footage. "Not for a single day. Not for a single hour." In the studio, Sarah was sobbing. Michelle was frozen, tears streaming down her face but not making a sound. Dr. Phil turned off the monitor. "Sarah, your mother never abandoned you. Your father, in his pain and anger, made a choice that hurt both of you. But Michelle has spent 27 years trying to be part of your life." Sarah looked at the box of letters at her feet. I didn't know. I thought you left because you didn't want me." Michelle finally found her voice, cracked and desperate. "I left because I was 21 years old and drowning. I had severe postpartum depression that I didn't understand. I was losing my mind, and I knew if I stayed in that state, I would hurt you. So I left to get help, to get better, so I could come back and be the mother you deserved. But I tried to come back." Michelle continued, her words tumbling out faster now. 2 months later, I came back. I was better. I had medication, I had therapy. And your father told me I was dead to you, that you were better off without me, that if I ever contacted you again, he would make sure I never saw you. So I wrote letters. Because at least then I was still trying to reach you." Sarah's face was contorted with grief and confusion. "Why didn't you fight harder? Why didn't you go to court?" "I did," Michelle whispered. "I filed for custody 3 times. Your father had lawyers, money, stability. I was a single mother who had left her infant and been hospitalized for mental health issues. Every judge said the same thing, you were better off where you were." Dr. Phil interjected gently. "Sarah, I've reviewed the court records. Your mother exhausted every legal option. The system failed both of you." This is the moment when Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. He looked at the cameras, then at the control booth, then back at Sarah and Michelle. 27 years of missed birthdays. 27 years of returned letters. 27 years of a mother and daughter separated by lies and legal systems and grief. "Stop the tape," he said quietly. The director's voice crackled through his earpiece, confused, asking for confirmation. "Stop the tape," Dr. Phil repeated, more firmly this time. The cameras powered down. The studio lights dimmed slightly. The audience sat in confused silence, unsure if they should stay or leave. Dr. Phil turned to Michelle and Sarah, ignoring every protocol, every producer frantically trying to get his attention from the control booth. "Forget the show," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Forget the cameras, forget the audience. You two have 8 feet between you and 27 years of pain. And I'm not going to let television format dictate how this moment happens." He gestured to the stage manager. "Bring 2 chairs to center stage. Clear everything else." Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. While the crew scrambled to rearrange the stage, Dr. Phil crouched down next to the box of letters. He pulled out the top envelope, postmarked 2 months after Michelle had left, addressed to baby Sarah, in careful handwriting. He opened it and read silently for a moment. Then he looked at Sarah. "Your mother's first letter says, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need you to know that leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done. I left because I love you, not because I don't. I'm getting help so I can be the mother you deserve. Please know that every breath I take is for you." Sarah's breath hitched. Can I read them? Dr. Phil handed her the box. Take your time. We're not going anywhere. For the next 6 minutes, an eternity in television time. The studio audience watched Sarah read letter after letter, decades of love and longing and desperate attempts at connection. Michelle sat 3 feet away, watching her daughter finally receive the words she'd been trying to send for 27 years. But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. Sarah was reading a letter from her 16th birthday when she stopped mid-sentence. Her hands were shaking so badly the paper was rattling. "Mom," she said. It was the first time she had used that word in 27 years. Michelle's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "Mom, in this letter, you say you were at my 16th birthday party. You say you stood across the street and watched through the window because Dad wouldn't let you come in." Michelle nodded, unable to speak. "You were there?" Sarah's voice broke completely. "You were there for my birthdays?" "Every single one," Michelle whispered. "I couldn't be inside, but I was there. I watched you blow out your candles every year. I saw you graduate. I was in the back of the church at your wedding last year." Sarah dropped the letters and crossed the 3 feet between them in 2 steps. She grabbed her mother and buried her face in Michelle's shoulder, sobbing with a rawness that made the entire audience weep. Michelle wrapped her arms around her daughter for the first time in 27 years, and the sound she made wasn't quite human. It was grief and joy and 27 years of longing released all at once. Dr. Phil stepped back, giving them space. He looked at the crew, his face set in stone, daring anyone to interrupt this moment. They stood there, mother and daughter, for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. No one moved. No one spoke. The studio had become a sacred space where time meant nothing and protocols were irrelevant. When they finally separated, Sarah's face was transformed. The hardness that had been there was gone. "I lost 27 years because of lies," Sarah said, her voice steady now. "I'm not losing another day." Dr. Phil finally spoke, his voice gentle. "Sarah, are you ready to start healing?" Sarah looked at her mother, really looked at her, and nodded. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver bracelet, tarnished with age. "Dad told me my mother left this in my crib the day she abandoned me. He said it was all she cared enough to leave behind." Sarah's voice hardened. "Another lie." "That's not true," Michelle gasped. "I left that bracelet because it was my mother's, your grandmother's. It was the most precious thing I owned, and I left it so you would always have a piece of our family, even if you didn't have me." Sarah closed her eyes. Then, with deliberate slowness, she put the bracelet on her wrist. "I've carried this in my pocket for 27 years, hating what it represented. But it wasn't about abandonment. It was about hope. Dr. Phil pulled a small card from his jacket pocket, something he'd prepared before the taping, knowing this moment might come. "Sarah, Michelle, I want you both to have this. It's information for a family therapist who specializes in reunification after long separations. You have 27 years of hurt to work through, and you'll need professional support." He handed the card to Sarah, but his eyes were on both women. "This is just the beginning. You've got decades of missed moments to grieve, but you also have the rest of your lives to build something new. Don't waste it. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten." The cameras came back on for the final segment. Dr. Phil addressed the audience directly, his voice carrying the weight of what they'd all just witnessed. "What you saw here today is the cost of silence and lies. Sarah lost 27 years with her mother because her father, in his pain, made choices that hurt everyone. Michelle lost 27 years of her daughter's life because a broken system and broken man kept them apart." He turned to the 2 women, who are now sitting side by side, holding hands. "But you also saw something else. You saw that it's never too late to choose healing. Sarah could have stayed angry forever. Michelle could have given up after 324 returned letters. But they both chose to try. And that courage, that willingness to risk more pain for the possibility of connection, that's what changes lives. The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted 3 full minutes. Several producers were openly crying. Even the cameras were shaking slightly as operators wiped their eyes. After the taping ended, Dr. Phil did something he rarely does. He stayed with Sarah and Michelle for another hour. He connected them with resources. A trauma-specialized therapist, a family law attorney to help navigate the legal implications of what Sarah's father had done, and a support group for families reunifying after estrangement. He also did something more personal. He wrote his personal cell number on the back of his business card and gave it to both women. "If you need help, call me. Not the show, not my office, me. What happened here today matters, and I'm invested in seeing you both through this." The episode aired and became an instant phenomenon. Within 48 hours, it had 47 million views. Hashtag 324 letters trended worldwide. Sarah and Michelle began weekly therapy, working through 27 years of pain. Sarah opened all 324 letters, discovering a lifetime of love documented in her mother's handwriting. Together, they created the 324 Letters Foundation to help families torn apart by mental health crises. The silver bracelet became its logo, a symbol of love that refuses to quit. 3 years later, at the Foundation's first fundraiser, Sarah approached Dr. Phil. "The day you stopped those cameras, you gave us the gift of time," she said. "That moment told us our healing mattered more than the show. It set the tone for everything that came after." The episode remains the most replayed moment in daytime television history. What matters isn't the analysis, it's the raw humanity of watching a mother and daughter find each other again. The sound of Sarah saying, "Mom," for the first time in 27 years. The moment when forgiveness transformed from a concept into a living, breathing reality. The silver bracelet that started as a symbol of abandonment became something else entirely. A reminder that love persists, that truth eventually surfaces, and that it's never too late to come home.